I had no doubt whatsoever about taking the role on. I mean, it was a central character. It was the lead character in the family, which was very important for me at that time. But what I remember saying that when we went to the read with Nick Lyndhurst and Leonard Pierce, who played Grandad, and Nick and I and Leonard went to have a drink when we knew we'd got the part. And what I said about the script to them then, I said, this is a very unusual script, in my estimation. I said, it's not a sitcom as such. I think it's a situation drama. And I think from that moment on, that's what happened to the piece. I could see that it wasn't just joke, which most sitcoms are. This was so different because it was, it was story-led, and the humour came out of the characters and the story, which was quite unusual at that time for comedy. Some of the hierarchy, not all, I mean some of the hierarchy was against casting me because I'd been playing such hapless characters and was sort of known for it, if you like. I'd never played a leading role or carried a series, and I believe they didn't think that I had the range as an actor to fulfill the aspirations of the lead role in this new series, to get it off the ground. One or two people had thrown their hat in the ring against casting me, but Ray Butt, to his good auspices, bless him, he was the director. And there was another director that I was working with at the time called Sidney Lotterby, who we were doing Open All Hours. And with his and Ray Butt's conviction that they knew that I had the range, that I was an actor that's talents had not been explored, they pushed for me, and that finally swayed the vote, because I suppose the casting vote would have been with the director, which was Ray Butt. And he had from behind him, he had people from the top floor, and he had John Sullivan all saying, he's not right, that David Jason will never do it. No, he can't do it. And yet Ray stuck to his guns. And, well, there you are, the rest is history, really. I think that what makes Derek Trosser tick is John Sullivan's script to start with. I mean, obviously, that's the genius behind it. I mean, that's the beginning. I always used to say that, John makes the bullets and I just fire them, really. The strength of the character that we eventually developed, because it was once John had seen how I was where I was taking the character, or how I thought the character would go, he then started to write for those strengths, well, for all of the characters. And what he eventually developed and put into it, and I think this is the thing, he's got a heart of gold. He's a tough, steely out exterior with a very much like John Sullivan, I suppose, with a soft heart. He's very emotional, very family orientated and driven, and in a strange way that a lot of people will disagree. He's very honest. He's a very honest man, and he's got so many good qualities. Yes, he wheels and deals, and he does a little bit of this, but he's very interesting in that he would never harm anybody, not unless they harmed his family or harmed him. He's a big negotiator. He'd talk his way out of trouble. But as I say, the most of it has come through John Sullivan's writing, I think, and we've extended it all the time into more and more reality, which is the things that we've got away. As I said originally, we get away from situation comedy into situation drama, where he sees the birth of his child, for example. That was a really moving experience, which I think John called on his own experience. But to put that in a situation comedy had been unheard of at that time. So you had to draw on tremendous confidence of your writer and your actor and your character to get away with something that you're going to do the opposite to what you normally do. Instead of trying to make people laugh, you're really trying to bring them along emotionally, make them cry. So Derek Trotter is a very rich character, full of all human emotions, and we have used them all and enjoyed using them all. I think that the way John had described working class people and council house people, if you like, but was quite brilliant. Because if you quoted one of the series at the time, which is Till Death Us Do Part, and they showed Warren Mitchell's character as the big. It was very funny, and I think Warren Mitchell was brilliant. But that was a family at war, really, a family at anger. Whereas what John tried to tune into was a huge mixture of like the real people are. They cry, they laugh, they take the mick out of each other, they go on trips together, they go down the pub. And one of the great things I think that John did, which I'm very pleased to say, and I wish they'd perhaps take a note at EastEnders, is that the pub was the central meeting place, and it's full of very, very amusing characters, and I'm sure they still are today. But sometimes in some series that you go into, and it's supposed to go into an East End pub, and everybody's at each other's throats. Well, John had managed to tap into the reality of ordinary people. They have a great, great sense of humour, and that was John's great strength. When we were first all working on the original first series, we were all feeling our way. We were all trying to unravel these characters. We were all trying to find what made them tick. We were all trying to find where the centre of the humour was. We were trying to develop everything about it, trying to make it better and funnier and whatever. So some of the stage directions that John had put in were very useful. But as time moved on, they became unnecessary. So I think that both John and I would agree that you don't need to, don't teach us to suck eggs, as it were, because we needed all that help in the first series, and then it moved. And as it moved on, we all became a little more confident in what we were doing and which direction our characters were going and how we would deal with the scenes. So, and yes, initially it was a great help. Well, the great thing about the BBC in those days and our working together, all of us, and John and I in particular, was after the show was a tradition. We'd all go to the bar, the BBC bar, and we'd have a few drinks and unwind and talk about what bits when the show went well and what bits didn't, and then we'd all go out for a meal or people would drift off. But during that time, when we were at the bar having a laugh and a chat, quite a lot of things would pass around, and one of the things was that he and I were talking, and he said to me, he said, I understand. He said, you used to be an electrician. So I said, yeah, that's right, I was, before I gave it all up and tried to become an actor. So he said, my father was a bit of an electrician. So I said, oh, what's that? He said, we used to do everything, really. He was, he used to... Well, see, when he was an electrician, he said, and he said, he did this, he went to this house, and he was supposed to be a plumber or whatever. And he said, and then he told me the story, and his story was he was only just telling a little story. He wasn't trying to be amusing. He said, but what happened was one funny incident. He said they wanted this chandelier cleaned, and my father, being ready for anything to earn a few extra quid, said, don't worry, Gov, we can do that for you, because he was with a gang of guys, and this very posh house. And this guy said, well, you sure you can do it? Oh, yes, so we're very experienced chandelier cleaners, sir. He said, and what they did, there was two chandeliers. He said, they went upstairs and undid the bolt. He said, and hit it with a hammer. He said, and the wrong one came down. He said, they were under this one, and the other one fell. Well, I was on the floor. I was hysterical. I said, John, you have to write it for him. He said, well, no, it's only just telling you a story. I said, but it's so funny. And he said, oh, do you think so? I said, yeah, it's hysterical. He said, oh, well, I'll think about that then. So during the next rehearsal, when we were rehearsing, he said, I'm thinking about it. He said, I've got the end. He said, I've got no idea how to get them there. And I said, well, that's up to you, John. You're the writer. I only said that I think the idea's funny. So anyway, John went off. And you see, it's part of sort of history that everybody remembers the chandelier. And it makes me laugh. Then it all came out of just anecdotes. John Sullivan and I sort of talking. John and I used to enjoy each other's company, and we would chat and this, that, and the other. And he came into rehearsals one day, and we were just chatting, and he said, "God," he said, "I saw something amused me." He said last night. So I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, I went down to the wine bar." I said, because he had this local wine bar where he used to live. He's just to have a couple of drinks. He said, and I'm standing there, he's quietly in the corner having a drink. He said, and there's a bloke. He said, at the bar. And he said, those flip-top bar things, where the people come in and out. I said, yeah. He said he was near there. He said, and what happened was, the barman came out and left the lid up. And this bloke went to lean, and it wasn't there. And he just recovered himself. He didn't fall. And he looked around, expecting people to have seen him, but nobody had. But he was pretending he meant to do it, said John. When John told me the scenario that he'd seen this guy nearly lose his balance in the wine bar, I just said to John, oh, I've got to fall through. Because John actually presented it to me as an idea that he wanted to put into the show, and he said, what do you think? And when he told me the story, I said, well, I think I've got to fall right the way through the bar. And that's when John said, oh, no, the guy didn't do that. I said, no, I know he didn't do that. I said, but if I do it, I will. So John said, oh, all right then, if you think that's better. So the next thing we know, John writes it into the script. And, what's quite interesting about that is that there's quite a lot of little elements, in order to bring off the surprise. There's quite a lot of interesting work. One of the things I remember, someone came up to me one day and said, I want to ask you a question, Mr. Jason. I said, yes, certainly. He said, you know that thing when you fell through the bar? And I said, yes. And he said, was it an accident? And I said, what do you mean, was it an accident? He said, did you mean to do it? And that to me was, yes, I said yes, and I went away and I thought, oh my God, if only you knew. The construction that went into that to make that work was very interesting. But people don't think it's work. They think, like that chap did, he think, oh, you just do it and it just happens. But no, it was like most of these things, like most things, there's a lot of thought and construction, and a lot of experience teaches you that, and you can only. I think the best comedy comes from people who have experience. Where I had an advantage of those sort of physical things, like falling through the hatch, etc., is because I had a tremendous grounding in the theatre. And I was the one, when I was in the theatre, I did all the Brian Rix farces, and I was on tour in plays, and I did all sorts of... And one of the great things that I did was it was very physical. I was very fortunate in being able to enjoy throwing myself about through hatches and tumbling. I spent 18 months in the play No Sex, Please We're British, which was tremendously physical. Even getting thrown out of doors and diving into settees and diving through hatches and getting dragged up to the ceiling in chandeliers and one thing and another. So it was quite natural for me. I was fortunate it comes to me quite, easily then. You have to agree that it was collaborative. It always is in anything I do. You collaborate with people, with the director, with the writer, and with the costume designer. You're quite right. I think I was one of the first people who had pressed jeans And we did it by running a stitch down the front, so they were permanently in, because Derek Trotter would think that was, really cool. So John's thoughts were not quite the same, so I had to convince him that that's the way I wanted to go, and he just said, okay, if that's the way that you want to go, I'll go with you. And so with the costume designer, I then approached the costume designer and said, look, there's this amazing guy that I used to know in the East End, and he used to wear a camel hair coat, beautifully laundered shirts, wonderful neat ties, polished shoes, you could see your face in them, trousers that fitted like a glove. And I said, that's the way I want to go. So he said, okay. So that's that's the way we went for that look. John Sullivan decided that when we got to series 5, 6, whatever it was the yuppies were coming in, it was all about yuppies. So he decided that he'd make Derek Trotter a yuppie, and he's got a power dress, and he had the briefcase, and so John introduced all those elements for the yuppie, and of course he scored brilliantly. Because at that time, and I think it was right, there was a film with Michael Douglas, I believe, and who had these amazing braces in this film, and he was he was a yuppie, he was a whiz kid on Wall Street or something. Can't remember the name of it. Well, of course, John introduced that of course now Derek Trotter had to wear these braces to hold up his trousers and walked around showing his braces. So again, the genius of John Sullivan is that he never let grass grow under his feet. He kept on using whatever was current at the time. And that's really how that power dressing business all came about, because suddenly you found Trotter in suits and ties and, this big Mac he'd got that done up in the front, and all of that was described by John. The biggest delight is that it's crossing age groups, meaning that when we were working on it all those years ago, that was for our generation, if you like. But to find that young kids of 10 and 12 and whatever, perhaps weren't even born when the first series went out, are finding it really funny and amusing, is a great reward. Because these sort of things don't happen very often, that you can be in something that transcends time. And one of the qualities, I think, that makes it endearing and lasting is it's very Laurel and Hardy in my mind. That you can show an old Laurel and Hardy film and kids of today will find them funny. Why? Because basically they are funny. Laurel and Hardy is about an unknowing fool and a knowing fool. And I think that the qualities that you have in Fools and Horses can be sometimes very similar to that. That we're all fools. All of the characters, are fools. Rodney is a fool. Derek can be a fool at times. And Uncle Albert or Grandad, are always fools. So that is its strength. We're not frightened of taking the mickey out of ourselves, or John Sullivan's not frightened of taking the mickey out of ourselves, and makes the characters vulnerable. And if the characters are vulnerable, then I believe that people warm to them. And there's nothing really vulgar about them, if you think about it. They're just endearing. Uncle Albert and Grandad have been the most endearing characters, I think. Nick's Rodney is a wonderful creation of a very, very mixed personality. And then there's Derek Trotter, who swings between the two. So fortunately, I think John's tapped that magical quality where it seems to be timeless. No one gets hurt. It's not cruel. And it's, dare I say this, it's simple humour. The jokes are, the story, the characters are not that complicated. You know about them when you see them. You can readily absorb them, and you trust them. And that's just the magic, I think, that John's managed to create. John is able to, through comedy, address issues that nobody else would dare to do in a situation comedy, or in a comedy drama, as I said, but we call it a situation comedy. And I remember, again, with fondness at the time, that very sadly we were starting to do the series, and we were out filming, and we heard that we knew Leonard wasn't well, who played Grandad. Leonard Pierce wasn't well, played Grandad, and he'd been in hospital, and we were managing to film it without him. And suddenly someone came on the set and said he'd unfortunately died. So we stopped filming, and that was it. We just all went home. We were very, very, very sad. And within the week, we came to a meeting, and we had to discuss what we were going to do with the series. And one or two of the bigwigs has said, it was very, very sad, but we must carry on. And what we'll do is we'll get a look-alike, and we'll carry on and have someone else play Grandad. Well, John Sullivan and I were absolutely appalled, and we said, no way, we weren't going to do that, because that would be an insult to the memory of a dear friend. So we talked about what we were going to do, and someone came up with the idea that maybe we need the three, because we needed the three generations. And someone said, well, maybe we could get an aunt that could come in, and we could have a woman in it. And I said, no way, I'm not playing it with a woman. And they said, well, why? I said, it's got nothing to do with it. I said, but how can we treat a woman like we treat the old man? It's funny that I call him a daft old git and throw him in the back of the van. It's acceptable. I couldn't do that with a woman. So, that idea didn't go down very well. So we eventually, a few people had written in, and we eventually found this wonderful chap who was Uncle Albert, eventually became Uncle Albert, and we decided that how we would introduce him would be that we would have a funeral for Grandad, which was Leonard Pierce. And in the wake afterwards, one of his relations would come out of the woodwork, and he would be Uncle Albert. So John now had to write this in like a week. And he said, John, are you serious that that's what you want to do? And he said, yes, I want to do it because I don't want, nobody in a family wants anyone to die. We don't. He said, and it happens. It just happens in real life. I said, and we've had it. We've had a bereavement. We've lost our granddad. So he said, I think we ought to have the funeral for him. And that's what we ought to do. We do it on television, and we will do it in real life, because we all went to Leonard's funeral. And that was the most amazing thing, that John Sullivan, in a week, took hold of grasped the nettle, and decided to have a funeral of a character that was in a series on screen. Never been done before. And, that came out of John's compassion. That's, I think, a direct analysis of how emotional John is as a man. He insisted that that's what he wanted to do out of respect for and the love of a character and an actor. Which you don't get many people who have that much respect for actors. Fortunately, we can say that very, very confidently here in the BBC. No names, no pacto. Well, as Derek Trotter would say, because I was just going to say that, my most favouriteest thing of all time. I think that there's so many. The chandelier, for obvious reasons, because it came out of a conversation that John and I had. Falling Through the Hatch, because it is now become a piece of classic comedy biz. But I suppose all in all, there's so many rich shows. But I think one of my favourites is the Blow Up Dolls. It's so silly. It was so silly. They're just so funny. When they go off, behind the bar and they just spring up. I mean, I think that it's very difficult, really, honestly, to say which is my best or most favourite, because every one of them, I think, has somewhere inside you just a favourite moment, because we spent so many years, so much time having such a good time, really enjoying ourselves. We had a fantastic team, had wonderful actors, and no one, I don't think one person ever had a crossword with anyone in the whole 20 years. John Sullivan used to bite his fingers down to the elbow when we were recording, because I would be notorious for drying in certain places, and John would go ape because he think I might have screwed up my timing, but I used to manage to get away with it. Now I think they all have a place in her heart, because for me it's the living Laurel and Hardy show, I suppose.